So good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I am Andrejs Rauhvargers. I am Latvia's representative to the Bologna Follow Up Group, and since 2007 I have been chairing those groups that prepared initially the so-called stock-taking reports, and now the report has a different name. It's a name of Bologna Process Implementation Report. The new report is different. In the stock-taking reports, I believe the main part was the scorecard with the countries pictured by, some said, traffic light colors from red to dark green. There was always a fight, why do I have this color or another? So this time it is all different, and it's also different in the sense that it was not only the structural things covered. Social issues were partly already in previous time, but it has been strengthened. And well, this is how the report looks like. This is the link to the report on Eurydice, or even further, the agency homepage. And so the Bologna Follow Up Group was in charge of the report, and some of us were working together with Eurydice colleagues to make the book in practice. The book is thick. It's, if I'm not mistaken, 204 pages. So what I can tell you today is actually just an appetizer. I hope that you will like to open the book and see what is inside. So we had several instruments this time. In previous stock-taking reports, we just had one survey from the countries, and so it was completely self-sent data, which is not always so good, because if there is any check, then you try to make the picture better. This time we had also Eurydice, which helped and did a lot for the book, but also gave its data. Eurostat and Eurostudent made their surveys and used the indicators they had. And so I hope the report is more interesting, and definitely it is more precise than earlier. So also the data from countries was much better, because countries had to supply directly to the database. They knew that this time we are asking about really results, and not just if you have a law adopted. Some countries in the past had adopted the laws and then postponed the implementation for many years and still looked green on the scorecards. This cannot happen anymore now, and therefore you will see at many of the maps that I will show, it's usually that this year's colors are not so green as the previous ones, because now we are measuring what is actually done. So the first, some of them will be those traffic light pictures, but others will be in different colors to make the indicator neutral. So this is the implementation of the first and second cycle, and here you can see some rather big countries that indeed have adopted laws. Everyone has done it, but in some countries the implementation is going on, and with the student stream moving through the universities, they will become green, but they don't look too green at the moment. Yes, what I forgot to say, I have a feeling that the implementation working group has prepared a kind of an X-ray picture of Europe. So you will have to make the diagnosis. I am not pretending that the the report tells everything, but when you look at different countries and how far each one has come, I think you will also have some conclusions of what to do at home. Now, here, this is the number of ECTS credits in bachelor programs in different countries. So you immediately see two extremes. There are countries where all the bachelor programs are 180 ECTS credits long, and there are some countries in which there are only four-year or 240 ECTS credits bachelors. There is a kind of an idea that perhaps some of those countries that only have 240 ECTS credits bachelors maybe have taken inspiration, at least in the past, from United States rather than from Europe. And so now it looks as it looks, and we simply have to understand that bachelors can be quite different across Europe. Here is the same story about the masters. First of all, there are several typical durations of master programs, starting with 75, or let's say the most widespread model is 120, but you see countries in which there are also even no 120 ECTS masters. Well, the master in European higher education area is so diverse that we are talking about the necessity in the further periods to rediscuss the issue of master and maybe make a subclassification of masters so that we better understand each other. Now, this is a question if students continue in master degrees after completing the bachelor's. To me, this seems to be a very important and interesting map. If you ask about the access, then the field is all green. All countries will tell you that, of course, there is access for a bachelor's to the master level. So let's not talk about that. But here we have the percentages of students who actually move on to the master's programs. And so we can easily see that in Europe you can find countries where there is less than 10% of students who want to go on master programs, and vice versa. You can have countries where it is nearly 100%. So we can make many guesses. One of them is that probably if we look at England, Wales, and Northern Ireland, where the number is quite small, that's a tradition in this part of Europe, because bachelor degree has always been employable, and so they don't see a big problem of not going to masters. There could be also a concern if everyone goes to master's programs. That makes me to ask a question. In those countries, isn't it the situation that the bachelors are not accepted in the labor market and therefore have to go for masters? So it seems that none of the extremes is what we should try to introduce in every country. So this indicator is completely neutral, but looking at our own countries and the situation in Europe, we have things to think about. Gaining credits towards bachelor program, or something is missing. The question is about the short cycle and if it gives credits for the next phase. First of all, you can see that there are a number of countries in Europe in which you don't have any short cycle programs at all. Otherwise, it seems quite okay, because in most countries, yes, you have some credit, and it's usually quite high percentage of credits that will be counted into bachelor program after this short cycle. Joint programs and joint degrees. Here the criteria are the same. And if you look for the percentages of universities that have joint programs, you can easily see that there are many more programs than actually joint degrees awarded. And this is a clear indication, as Jakob already was speaking about that the countries have to readdress the legislation again to finally allow the real joint degrees. I'm afraid that is the old mistake when quite many ministries were answering, there is no problem with awarding of joint degrees because our legislation don't mention them. Forget it. If it's not mentioned, then there are a number of rules that will not allow it. So here, just take your instruments and work. So, scorecard indicator on implementation of ECTS system. It looks rather good, and even now it's slightly less green than at previous time, but generally it's okay. But when you split it into two parts, meaning the implementation of learning outcomes and the other part, which is learning to count until 60 credits per year. So here we see that the picture is not so good. So actually, if ECTS implementation is not going as it should, it is because we have not properly introduced the learning outcomes. That seems clear from this picture. Qualifications frameworks. Well, let me remind that qualifications frameworks were decided at Bergen in 2005, and then it was said that by 2007 it should be implemented. In 2007 we said, well, perhaps 2010. And now in 2012 we have 10 countries that would be green if it was that kind of picture. And there would be 13 more countries that have a potential to do the job within a year. But we also have countries which are still in the first 4 steps, which actually means talking about qualifications frameworks, but not yet doing. So because of that, there is a phrase in the communiqué as well that those countries should double the efforts. Let's hope it happens. Recognition. If you look at the questions that the Bologna Secretariat receives, most of them are questions on recognition. And let's say it's not questions, it's complaints about misrecognition. The problem is that despite the ratification of Lisbon Recognition Convention, which has happened nearly in all countries, the actual implementation does not work that well. Government representatives often answer to this question in approximately this kind of mood. You see, our universities are autonomous. That's great that they are autonomous. But the countries go on saying, and that's why we cannot tell them how they will recognize and how they will not recognize. It's a bit strange because it's countries that signed the convention and promised to implement it, and now it will be the jubilee of 15 years of Lisbon Convention, and still it has not fully implemented. So because of that, there was a proposal, and it is reflected also in the communiqué, that that quality assurance should assess also the institutional recognition procedures, because it's also quality of our institutions how we treat the diplomas or credits coming from abroad. And because higher education institutions have accepted quality assurance, It's just another task that quality assurance will do. Let's see if that works, but that is, at the moment, we thought that it is the best possible solution for now. Quality assurance, of course, comparing with 99, the picture is great, and quality assurance works in so many countries. Well, before year 2000, it was just few countries in Europe. We also have the European Quality Assurance Register, which was the idea that when the national quality assurance agencies get into that register, then other countries or higher education institutions of other countries could also use those reliable quality assurance agencies. So, yeah, there will be a slide in future, but the problem is that everything went well until countries had to really allow their universities to take quality assurance from outside. And you will see in the map that it is not going so fast, and that, and again, ministers mentioned that in the communique, that this should be resolved. So generally, the external quality assurance is progressing. Why some countries that were green in the past are not so green anymore is that the quality assurance agencies had to prove that they live up to the standards and guidelines. And in some cases, they did everything quite well, but there was a doubt that the institutions, that the agencies are not independent enough. And that's, for instance, in my country, and I believe the reason is the same also in the other two Baltic countries, that it's because of the poor financing of quality assurance agencies and doubt of experts that they can be fully independent of the institutions. And if that is a reason, it might take some time while we have more money. But that's another other story. So, yes, a question to countries. What is the main outcome of the external evaluation? The brown color is the kind of cutoff. It's a permission to exist, like either if you go through the quality assurance, then you are allowed to issue diplomas or to open programs. If not, then not. But there are also quite a number of countries in which it is mainly advice. We know what kind of advice that is. If you don't follow that advice, after some time, you could be pointed at, and then consequences can come. But in principle, there are those two big streams. Ability of higher education institutions, yes, to be evaluated by an outside agency. So it's this color, like Finland, where it is allowed, and you can see how few such countries are. The countries that say, in some cases, it basically means that it's allowed for assessing the joint programs, but not normal programs. It's not for all countries, but we noticed that can be typical for this answer. So the majority of countries have not yet taken courage to say, yes, we will trust quality assurance from outside. Level of international participation and student participation, you can see in a way it's the same groups of countries. In many cases it is okay, but in some there is practically no international involvement or student involvement in the assessments. This was an interesting question. Publication of critical and negative outcomes of quality assurance by institutions. So here, suddenly most countries have said no institutions will publish negative outcomes of quality assurance. Of course, it's understandable because we are competing with each other, we are competing at the world scale, and still a little more openness would look better. So now we move into the social issues. So the brown countries have general policy approach for widening participation. The squared countries not only have a general policy, but they also have picked out the underrepresented groups and have targeted measures for those. So yes, there are just a couple of countries, including my own, which have no policy on this issue. Then this is an important graph and makes one think. So this is a proportion between the probability that a young person will get a higher education degree, depending on or how many times this proportion is bigger for those for whom at least one of the parents has higher education compared to people whose parents both have only, as it's called medium education, which means upper secondary or upper secondary plus some vocational training. So it's even not comparison with the really low education parents. And we can see that, well, there are countries where it is, this proportion is 13, and Europe's median is more than 3, so Europe as such could think about these issues. That is a phenomenon that happens always, of course. In any society, there will be more students from families where parents had higher education already. But still, if we really think about accessibility, then we have to do something about it. So this is the, okay, if it was 1, then the number of men and women in higher education would be equal. As you see, these are different percentiles, and I will not try to comment that, but we see the tendency. Over the 10 years, there is a permanent feminization of higher education. So my question is, are all the men going to hunt again? And if not, why the hell they are not going to higher education? Now, of course, if we want to improve the situation with access, and if we want more people in higher education, we have to check the alternative routes for entering higher education. Alternative route means everything that is not the official qualification with which you can enter higher education, such as general secondary education, or in most countries also at least one of the types of vocational education is eligible. So it's an interesting division of Europe, you see. The more to the east and the more to the south, it's more likely that there are no such routes. This is a scorecard on prior recognition of prior learning. Prior learning is, here it's measured in the sense that your prior education will be assessed, and you will get some credits for further studies. Here the yellow countries are not that bad. They have already adopted the legislation, but it's not yet a regular practice. So the criteria were rather tough. So the legislation is not there in the red and orange and orange countries. So it has grown very much in Europe, very strongly since, because I would say 5 years ago, there were a couple of countries that had excellent systems for recognition of prior learning, and then there was a mass of countries that had not heard about it. So this is really a big leap. Fees in the first cycle. As you see, there are no fees in the Scandinavian countries, Finland, Scotland, Ukraine, and that's it. So we are talking about lifelong learning in higher education, and of course then we should think seriously about more people who are 30 years and older. We need them in our higher education system if we really want to make ourselves competitive in future, because our demographic situations, we know how they look like, and this is our reserve. So yes, there are countries where even up to 40% are older learners, and then there are countries in which it is barely 5–10%. This is also a message to us all. You can see that the proportion of part-time students has grown constantly, not very quickly, and still we are getting more and more students who want only to study part-time. Probably because the times are not so easy, that the loans are difficult to get, but we have to be prepared, because that is a different case, and it is increasing and probably will go on increasing. Well, this is an interesting thing, and it makes us to think about quality. So you see full-time students who had indicated how many hours they actually use for higher education purposes. And, well, not too many, up to, say, 5–10%, mainly can easily live with 10 hours per week. And by far not all indicate that it would be 30 hours and more. And so the question is, how do they progress? And if they do, then the question is, how about the criteria? Completion rates. The median is 72%, and that exactly means that 28% of the higher education funding, be it private or state, is thrown out. And therefore, probably, we have to think about it. So again, it's different in different countries. In some, if it's always 100%, then it would be strange, but we don't have countries with 100%. We rather have countries who have to think how to improve the situation. This is a proof that it's worth studying. Here you see the unemployment ratio for high attainment meaning ISCAD 5 and 6. Its medium attainment ISCAD 3 and 4, and low attainment is ISCAD 2 and lower. As you see, it's always much higher unemployment for those groups which don't have higher education, and higher education helps people to keep employed. There is another picture which is not here, but I will just tell you that it was also measured how long time it takes to find the first job after completing education, again at the same levels. And it was about 2.5 times shorter for higher education graduates compared to secondary school graduates. So it again shows that it's worth studying. This is my last slide, so don't worry. And the only slide on mobility, although there is a chapter on mobility. This one, again, I have to first explain. On the vertical axis, there is a percentage of outgoing students who are going outside the country, not for exchange, but for getting a degree. And on the horizontal axis, the zero would be that the incoming and outgoing stream is the same. The positive side is that the incoming stream is bigger than outgoing, and negative is if the incoming stream is smaller than outgoing. So our friends statisticians have divided us into 4 sectors. So here, these are countries which are open systems. There is a high outgoing mobility, and even more students are coming in, so countries can be happy. These countries are attractive systems, so everyone likes to come there to study, but the local students are not going out so much. Here you have limited systems, and the indication is that many students leave, but not so many come to study in those countries. And then, well, those countries can proudly say we are closed systems. I didn't invent that for my country, but so it's a small flow of students outside, and even smaller who come to study to those countries. So of course that makes us think and probably change something. So thank you for your attention.